All right, gentlemen, we're going to get started now. Thanks again for coming out. And, this organization, I've always heard a lot about it over the years. And when I was, as you know, I was going down to Kensington a lot. I went down there recently, only a few months ago, and I met someone in there. Was his name Bill, was that, or another? Brian. From Teen Challenge, and as he sits in there in the Rock Ministry Outreach Center, and as I was talking to him, I didn't realize that they were coming down there so regularly. And when I heard the things they were doing, it's like, wow, this is so needed. So that connection was reestablished, and since then he put me in touch with Greg, and just met him for the first time in person today. But I'm really excited because this affects every one of us, and it's something we really need to know how to deal with. And so without further ado, let's welcome Greg to come on up and share with us today.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to come share about our programs, what we're doing in Kensington, and about myself. I'm going to give you guys my testimony. I wanted to start by saying you'll hear some different names of the programs. PA Adult and Teen Challenge is our residential discipleship program, and you'll hear it referenced by me a lot as Teen Challenge. But we added the adult to it in 2016 because we haven't taken children in the program or adolescents in the program in a long time. We actually changed from adolescents probably sometime in the late 80s, early 90s. We haven't been taking teens. We've been taking 18 and up. So now our programs are primarily for those 18 and up. So you'll hear that. You'll hear our name and centers, and I'll get a little more into that, and then you'll hear about Ascend Ministries. So just kind of be mentally prepared as I go through, but the primary thing I'll be sharing about is Teen Challenge and the impact that that's having. But I wanted to start just by giving you guys a little bit of my testimony, my story, and how I ended up with the organization, and then I'll break down for you guys what we're doing as an organization in Kensington and people's lives today. So I grew up in a church, like a lot of people here probably grew up in the church, got to hear the songs and got to hear the speaking and did the children's church and all that stuff. But it never resonated with my spirit. It was never something I fully surrendered to. I had moments where I surrendered, either out of emotion or out of the experience, but I had never truly surrendered in a way that I woke up the next morning wanting to follow Jesus. I kind of would always wake up the next morning wanting to pursue my own gains. And as I was growing up, I started seeking attention through very negative things. My brother was a bully. My dad was a trucker, so he was gone weeks at a time, and my mom worked nights. So I would wait as early as 5th grade. I would wait until she was gone to work, and I would go out and hang out in the streets till 4 or 5 in the morning, and most of the people that are out there aren't exactly the best influence for a little kid. So I was running around. Well, in 6th grade, I dropped out of school. By 13 years old, I started using marijuana, and you can't get a job at 13, so I started stealing stuff around the neighborhood so that I could afford the marijuana, and I really considered myself like an anarchist. I was a skateboarder, I was using drugs, and I was running around with all of these negative crowds and stuff like that. So by 15, I started getting into harder drugs. I started using cocaine, mushrooms, a lot of alcohol, LSD, stuff like that. And at the age of 16, from that lifestyle, it led me to starting to use amphetamines, methamphetamine. And what happened was I went into a room, and my brother was in there who was also using a lot of drugs, and he had some white powder in front of him. I had no idea what it was, and I said, "Can I get some of that?" And it turned out to be methamphetamine. And very quickly after that, I started learning how to cook and sell methamphetamines. I became fully addicted to methamphetamines and lost interest in just about everything else in my life. And to really sum up who I was by age 17, I think the Bible does the best job of summarizing that. And this comes from Romans 1:21 and 28 through 31. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliceness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only to do the same, but also to approve of those who practice them, which isn't exactly a life verse that most people have. But I think that really summarized where I was and where that lifestyle took me to. So at the age of 17 was the first time I got arrested for drugs. I got pulled over in a car, and I got arrested with possession with intent to distribute. I got out of that charge a little later because I was a minor. And at 18, a trailer that I was living in got raided, and they found a meth lab in there. So I spent 1 year in jail. In jail, I thought, I can do this on my own. I don't need a program. I don't need help. I don't need other people. Having probation and not wanting to go back to jail will be plenty enough to keep me clean. That wasn't true. What happened when I got out is I went back to my old friends. I went back to the old things I knew and immediately went right back into drug use, went back into drug dealing, went back into that lifestyle very quickly. And so shortly after that, I got arrested again with a quarter pound of weed and some other drugs, and they sent me to prison. I spent 2 years in prison. And while I was in prison, I had no mind to get clean. I was like, okay, how do I have fun while I'm here, and how do I continue the lifestyle I'm living? Because again, I just didn't care at that point in my life. I don't remember thinking or having much of a conscience to say I probably shouldn't do this. So I started getting high while I was in prison, started using drugs, started, even making hooch in the ceilings and stuff like that. And a friend of mine was supposed to come visit me, and so I thought, okay, it's okay if I take a handful of drugs. And he actually called my parents and said, hey, I can't make it today, so if you guys want to go ahead. I'm going to call the prison and tell them I'm not coming. Now, I had just taken a large handful of morphines, so I could barely keep my head up, and my parents are coming in to visit me, and I have no idea. So when they get there, I can't keep my head up. I can't look at them. I'm doing this. I actually went in the bathroom and threw up because they bought me some snacks and I couldn't keep them down. And my mom walked out, and my dad just shook his head and said, how can you do this? She was just sleeping again. How can you keep getting high? And I said, you're just going to have to learn to deal with it. This is who I am. This is what I do. And that's it. And they left. And so my mom stopped coming to see me for a couple months, and my dad called and said, hey, I'm going to come see you. And this is about 2 months into it. Now, I didn't know. He's a truck driver, so he was out in the middle of Arizona sitting at a truck stop, fueling up. And somebody had walked up to him and just struck a conversation with him and started telling my dad about his nephew who had gone to Teen Challenge, and how this program had took his son, who was a heroin addict, and transformed his life, and how now he was working a full-time job. He was engaged to get married. And so my dad came back and he says, I just heard about this program. It's a year-long program, and I'm still in my mess, and I said, I'm never going to a year-long program. I'm getting out of prison. I've been locked up for 3 years. You want me to go to a year-long program? And he said, what's it going to take? And I said, I don't know. Pay off all my fines and court costs. And I said that thinking he was going to say no. But he said, fine, I'll do it. You go, I'll pay off everything. Everything you have, I'll pay it off. And I was like, why'd you have to say yes? You were supposed to say, I'm in a very lost mindset. So I was actually angry he said yes, because I said it thinking he would just say, no, I'm not going to do that. You got to go on your own. So I went very reluctantly. I went into Teen Challenge after I got out of prison. My dad called my probation officer and said he agreed to go. Whatever paperwork you got to do, make sure he does. So they made it so I couldn't step foot in my hometown because they knew how much of a disaster I was. So I got a call from my probation officer, and she's like, you're not allowed to go home. And she's like, I want you from prison to Teen Challenge, or I'm going to replicate you, and you're going to spend a week in jail. I was like, all right, fine. So I went to Teen Challenge, and I was very reluctant at first. But what happens when you go to a program that it is saturated with the gospel, is saturated with people that love Jesus, it's very hard to keep those walls up for a long period of time. But I rebelled for the first month. I got a lot of trouble, got a lot of write-ups, had a lot of people praying for me. In fact, my roommate would get up in the middle of the night. I had no idea. And he would put his hand on me and pray for me while I was sleeping, because I would curse in my sleep. And, I would talk in my sleep, and I would just say very, negative things. So he would get up and pray for me. So anyways, I was in trouble while I was in the program, and they have you read scripture and do this different growth activities and stuff like that whenever you get in trouble. And I was sitting down reading the Bible as part of one of my disciplines, one of my growth plans. And I was in James 1:21, and because I would always start with the short books whenever they said to read. And it says, therefore get rid of all moral filth that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, for it is strong enough to save your soul. And for the first time in I think my entire life, I felt the difference between worldly guilt and godly conviction at that moment. And I truly saw my life for the filth it was, and just the moral release that I let go of anything good and just consumed all that was bad. And so I gave my life over to Christ, and I said, God, just take everything. I said, I want nothing. I said, I know if I touch it, I'll destroy it. And it just kind of was like my eyes were open to my past patterns and my lifestyle and all of that. So I gave away my truck. I gave away all my money. I called my brother and I was like, hey, this thing is hidden here. This thing is hidden there. Go get rid of all that stuff. I don't care what you do with it. Get rid of it. You can have my truck. You can have my money. I was like, if I have anything, I'll probably leave. I'll find an excuse, whatever. Because I would watch guys, I was in the program, I would watch them leave, any excuse, a past girlfriend, a relationship, whatever it was. So I was like, well, let me get rid of everything. I had my mom get rid of my phone. I threw away all my phone numbers and all my contacts. And I surrendered my life to the Lord. And so I went through the year-long program. God blessed me with the opportunity to start college. So I eventually went through my bachelor's degree in psychology, master's in professional counseling, on to becoming a licensed professional counselor. And I left Teen Challenge in 2008 and came back in 2011 to start working as a counselor. And I just really can truly say that it is amazing what happens when someone is in an environment that is filled with the gospel, that is filled with the presence of Jesus Christ, that is filled with staff who love the Lord and who are sowing into people, who are giving them opportunity after opportunity to know Christ, to be discipled in him, and to grow in that way. And so that was my experience throughout the process. And I started working in Teen Challenge. I started serving as a counselor. And we always knew that there was this dilemma, that there was this issue as we were going through, where we had this wonderful, amazing, year-long program that people could go to and that they could be healed from their substances, that they could be exposed to the gospel, and that they could experience this powerful discipleship experience where they're growing and being nurtured in Christ. But there was a pretty big problem. And that problem was they had to commit to a year-long program. I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with someone in Kensington or in the city or who's on drugs. If you say, hey, yeah, I got this great program, you can go, and it's got a weight room, and it's got a chapel, and they're like, oh, that sounds wonderful. And they're like, yeah, how long is it? It's a year. Click. Yeah. It's a year. Click. And we got a lot of clicks. A lot of clicks. Got anything else? Got anything shorter? Because most people, it's hard enough to make the phone call, right, to go to a program. But then when you're talking a year away, they get overwhelmed. And the CEO, Chris McFadden, was praying about that. And he realized that we had this issue of 80-20. We had this issue where we were only serving about, and it was probably less than 20% of the people who called, which means that 80% were going somewhere else. 80% were going somewhere they probably weren't going to be exposed to the gospel. 80% were going somewhere else where they wouldn't have an opportunity for a longer-term discipleship program. 80% might just stay in the system. We didn't know. But what we did know is they weren't ready to commit to a year-long program. What we did know is that we didn't offer detox services. And whenever we would send someone to a detox and say, call us when we're done, we'll come pick you up, we would never hear from them again. They would go into a different program and they would say, why go there for a year? You can stay with us for 30 days and then we'll set you up with whatever. And they would go back into the cycle. So this concept came up, and it came up from Luke 5. And it said, it says, one day Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, where the people were crowding around him to hear the word of God. He saw 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Simon answered, Master, we've worked all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say, I will let down the nets. When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. Then they signaled to their partners in the other boats to come and help them. And they filled the boats so full of fish that they were almost sinking. And I know I've heard a couple people this morning reference fishing, right? And there's some quotes in fishing. The bigger the bait, the bigger the fish. The bigger the net, obviously, the bigger the catch. And we had this little itty-bitty net in which we were using to catch fish. And the idea behind addressing this 80-20 thing is, how do we create a nice wide net where we can get the people who only want to commit to 1 month, are just barely willing to come into detox? How do we get to expose them to the gospel and still offer this year-long program and these services? So what we decided to do is around 2016, we decided to start a detox and a 30-day program. And we thought this will give us an opportunity to reach those people, and then from the detox and 30-day program, they can transfer into our long-term program. We've had a chance to offer them a clinical service that stabilizes them, gets them off the substance, meets their medical and psychological needs, and exposes them to the gospel, so that if then they recommit, they can transfer to our long-term program. And that's when we started our 30-day rehabilitation program, which creates a clinical model for people to come in. And so from there, we were able to offer this incredible service to people. We were able to have them in an environment. And what's interesting is even the guys who don't want to come to a faith-based program, even the guy who has no interest in the gospel, and even in a program where the spiritual components of the program are voluntary, right? We still have about a 70% attendance rate from that program in our chapel services. So they're coming in saying, I don't want nothing to do with that. I'm just here for the rehab. And saying, hey, you want to go to chapel? Sure. you know? And then they're being exposed to the gospel. And some of them are coming to Christ. Some of them are beginning that kind of process of surrender. And it really is a beautiful thing to see, especially when you get to see that guy. I work in Kensington, and we'll get more into that. But when you get to see that guy, it's like, I don't want nothing to do with that stuff. Just get me in the program, to in the chapel worshiping. It's just, it's surreal to see. You just thank God. You sit back and you say, I love that. So then we said, okay, we have these people who don't want to commit to another 11 months, right? Because that's still almost a year. So we said, how do we break this up a little bit more? And how do we get these people some foundational discipleship experience and some foundational discipleship principles, and then have maybe a shorter portion of the program? And so what we did was we broke our other 11 months down into a 9-month section and a 90-day section and an 8-month section. So this 90-day program covers all of their intensive outpatient needs, which is like the next level of care from the 30-day program, and has them in residential discipleship, where we go through the core curriculum of Teen Challenge. Adult and Teen Challenge has a curriculum. So we'll go through that curriculum while they're in the residential side of the discipleship program. And then on the clinical side, they're getting all of their drug and alcohol needs met with the 90 days of intensive outpatient. So they're getting services, which is providing revenue for them to stay in the program, while at the same time helping them grow and develop in their psychological and social and drug and alcohol needs, while at the same time experiencing all the benefits of our discipleship program. And all of a sudden, what we're seeing is as we create and expand what we would call our levels of care, or giving them stepping stones for how long they're in the program and how much engagement they're doing, we're seeing more and more people staying committed and willing to do that. Because the one who said, I can't do 11 months, is now saying, I can do 90 days, right? And so then we have the chance to kind of build a framework under the gospel for them to really excel them forward, and to really give them some really good tools to re-enter the community, to re-enter the church environment with some understanding of the word and some biblical principles to live by. And so what that's turned into is that when an individual comes in, they can go to detox in 30 days, then they can transition into 90 days, and then they can stay for another 8 months. And then we still have our traditional internship programs, which gives them the opportunity to intern in various places in our program. It might be work in the front desk. It might be work with one of our chaplains. It might be work in any business development, anything like that. And then through that internship, there's 2 6-month internships. So they can learn kind of a skill while they're working with us through the intern program. And then beyond that, they can apply for a position. And what's interesting is even our CEO, Chris McFadden, who's over the entire Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge programs, went through that entire process. He went through all of the phases of the program, and then went on to an internship. From the internship, went to college, stayed on as the COO shortly after that, and then eventually applied for the CEO position, and now is the president and CEO of the program. And roughly about 40% of our staff are graduates of the program. And so it's really an amazing process to see just how far someone can go. I myself being a graduate, my supervisor's a graduate, the VP of Clinical Services is a graduate. It's just an amazing thing to see how much God does in someone's life, and how that equips them to continue to grow in the process and then transition into helping others. Did you have a question? Oh. Okay. All right. So at the end, I'll open it up for questions. So where does the Naaman Center come in? So around, I think it was 2018, an opportunity came up for us to take over a program called the Naaman Center. The Naaman Center was started by a Christian psychiatrist years and years ago. I forget the exact year. And what they endeavored to do was offered faith-based outpatient services to individuals, because up until that point, there had only been secular outpatient services. So if you were going to go to a program for drug and alcohol and you wanted to get it from a faith-based perspective, it didn't really exist in the area at that point. I know that other places probably had it. So they had started this program, and it had been in existence for years, and they had come to us and said, hey, would you take us over? We'd like to kind of go under your umbrella. You can take over all of the billing and all of that stuff. And so they came into the family of ministries that we now do. And so we took their model and said, how do we expand this model throughout Pennsylvania and into places where people aren't necessarily getting these services, especially from a biblical framework, from believers, where if they're open to the gospel, we can share it with them. If they're open to discipleship, we can make it an active part of their recovery journey. So once we took that over, we said, let's start try to expand into prisons. Let's try to expand into homeless shelters. Let's try to expand with some new locations. And I forget the exact number, but I think they were at about 5 or 6, and now we're at about 16 locations. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to go into a prison and say, hey, we want to put one of our counselors in here. And that counselor is going to represent Naaman Center. And that counselor is going to give services to all the people in here to help them with their drug and alcohol needs. And then we have an opportunity to plant a Bible-believing person in that prison, and they get to be exposed to the gospel and exposed to the opportunity for wholeness and growth in their recovery process. And so it's really been an amazing thing. So all of that kind of happened and has been growing from 2018 moving forward. We've had the Naaman Center. And then around 2020, well, in 2019, I personally moved to Philadelphia. We had a women's program there. And that women's program was right in Germantown. And from the front sidewalk of that location, there was drug use up the street and drug use down the street. So we decided as a team, it's not the best place to have women in a program. So let's take them and move them to Berks County, where we can provide them a nice, safe environment to do their programming. And it was really a wonderful thing, because the length of time people were staying in the program, these ladies were staying in the program, from being in Philadelphia to moving into Berks County, where they're in a rural setting, doubled. So now they're staying longer, they're doing a lot better, there's a lot less anxiety about the environment they're in, and there's a lot less triggers around them. We still want to serve Philly, right? There's this huge gap in what we're doing, where we really want to be in Philadelphia. We really want to provide these amazing services, this opportunity to expose people to the gospel to Philadelphia. And so we started sending a team into Philadelphia to partner with the Rock Ministries. And what started from just one to 2 days a week turned into now we are in Kensington 5 days a week, and sometimes on weekends to do different events and stuff like that at the Rock Ministries, or we have a chaplain going out and doing chaplaincy with some of the other chaplains with the Rock, and we have people who are going out and meeting the needs of people who are open to coming into detox and open to coming into rehab. And I just got this number back, but since December, 115 people we've been able to take out of Kensington and put in a program. And that is amazing. It's amazing the amount of people, and about 60% of them are staying in the other programs. And so it's just unreal the opportunities that have opened up as a result of building out a framework for people to come into a program that is less kind of abrasive than saying you got to come for a year. And really give them an opportunity to come in their weakness into a program where they can receive that grace and care and love that comes from a faith-based setting. So that's primarily all that I have right now. And I think if we want to hop off live, we can do questions. No, there is no co-ed. The men's and the women's programs are the men's and the women's programs are on the same grounds, and there are strict rules for not interacting between men and women and stuff like that. And none of the activities are done co-ed where they'll interact. If there is a chapel service or a speaker or something like that, then they will be separated in the chapel when those speakers come. Oh, God definitely spoke to me while I was in Teen Challenge, and really just showed me my sin and my lifestyle, and that I needed to surrender to Him, and He did that through His Word. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, sir. Yeah. Yeah. So so we are so when you